Hey guys, this is John, and I'm playing Fido2222 in the 15-minute pool on ICC. So Fido opens with d4, and let's play knight f6, a flexible way to reply to d4. So Fido is Swiss, it seems. It's from Switzerland. Okay, let's play e6. Maybe we'll go into a Nimzo complex, or Queen's Indian, or Benoni. We'll make up our mind. Let's play Nimzo. Not a lot of games that I have with the Nimzo from the black side on my channel. So he plays f3, a sharp move. This was played in the World Championship match between Anand and Carlsen in one of the decisive games. Let's see. So I can play d5 or c5 against this. I can also play d6 as I recall. Let's maybe go d6. This is an interesting way of handling the position. Not as sharp as d5 or c5, but I intend to just play e5 sometime and adopt a pretty typical structure for this opening. Now, do I play it right away? If I play it right away, he can trade and then trade queens, so that's not the greatest, I don't think. But maybe I can trade on c3 first. If I'm going to trade on c3, I should probably do it now, because otherwise he gets a chance to play knight ge2. Now I can make up my mind, like maybe knight c6 or maybe e5 right away, as I was alluding to earlier. Or maybe just castle. Let's play knight c6 first. So I've given up the bishop pair, but I've damaged white's structure. They do have a very nice center, but I hope that my structural integrity can make up for that. Yeah, I'm thinking e5 now. Let's do that. I'm expecting knight e2. Let's say knight e2 and then castles, castles. Or knight e2, castles, bishop g5 maybe played. Okay, they play knight e2, and how comfortable am I with bishop g5? Like if that move is played, how much does it bother me? That's a key question. I don't think it's worth playing h6 this early in order to stop bishop g5. That just feels incorrect. So let's castle first. And if they castle, maybe b6, I'm thinking. b6 and try to play bishop a6, knight a5, attack c4. So b6, knight bishop g5, bishop a6, f4, maybe a direct approach. Do I have sufficient resources to weather that storm? If I play h6, they might play f4 just straight away. Let's go b6. I think I need some element of counterplay, and going bishop a6, knight a5 fits the bill. You know, if they play bishop g5, I might go h6, bishop h4, g5 myself. It's probably okay to do that. It stops them from playing f4 in the future as well. Let's check Fido's stats for a moment. So they played about 1,700 15-minute games, peak rating of 2081. So bishop g5. I think it's good to throw in h6 regardless of how they react. I predict bishop h4. Yeah, and now do I play g5? And one interesting thing is, with the bishop on h4 rather than g5, if they continue with f4 and I take, let's say they were to take with their rook, I might just be able to go g5 then and win material due to that fork. So two main candidates right here, just bishop a6, kind of ignoring white's potential kingside play, or g5, just take the bull by the horns. G5 is attractive, though. I like the fact that it forces the bishop back. I am wary of weakening the f5 square, however. That is one thing we must keep in mind. So let's say bishop a6, f4, we take. Can they favorably take either way? They might be able to take on f6 and then take on f4. Maybe that's the way to go. You know what? I am going to play g5. I don't want to leave it up to them to decide whether to play f4 or not. I'm going to make that decision for them. So, as happens a lot in this setup, I put my pawns on dark squares to make up for the fact that I don't have a dark square bishop and he does. I want to restrict that bishop as much as I can, and that means establishing pawns on the opposite color of that bishop. Yeah, bishop f2 makes sense because I think it's smart for them to keep the g3 square open. Now, bishop a6 or knight h5. Knight h5 would be a move to preempt knight g3. Because if I go bishop a6, they go knight g3, I go knight a5, they might be able to sack this pawn in hopes of getting their knight to f5. Yeah, let's go here. I feel like this move could be useful. Our knight wasn't that well placed on f6 anyways, so it's probably good that we're moving it. For them, it may make sense to offload their pawn at some point with c5. I do recall one game on my channel where that happened. I had pawns on d6, b6 in this type of setup, and my opponent played c5. So if knight g3, I'll probably take it. I could play knight f4 too, but I have a feeling I would take it instead. Well, there is something to be said for knight f4. So yesterday I played a game in the Grunfeld from the black side in the 15-minute pool, and I commented that that was an opening I felt uncomfortable about going into without knowing it a whole lot. Grunfeld is not part of my regular repertoire. Here I think the Nimzo is a little bit more acceptable. It's an opening you can feel your way through a bit better. It's rooted in strategy and not knowing specific lines necessarily, so that's why I feel more comfortable playing like a Nimzo setup, even though this also isn't a part of my normal repertoire. Okay, so if I play bishop a6, are they planning on c5? So let's say bishop a6, c5, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, d takes c5. Appears to win a pawn, but they have queen b5. Attacking my knight. Somehow I think I'm going to come out of that okay, though. I could start with knight a5, but bishop a6 seems better. What is the point of rook b1? Is there some deeper reason behind that move? Because I don't quite get it. And there's nothing to attack down the b file. Okay. We'll find out what the point of rook b1 is. Note that if they play queen a4 trying to attack the bishop and the knight, I can just play knight a5. That protects my bishop, and both pieces will be aimed at c4 then. Yeah, I'm still baffled by rook b1. Unless they're planning to swing the rook up somewhere, like b3, a3, but it just doesn't really fit with the position. There's too many pawns that black has over here. The position is too closed for a rook to be effective. I can't imagine rook b5 was the idea. Quite unusual. It's nice that I can play f6 if I really need to ever, and that would establish every single one of my pawns on dark squares. But if the e5 pawn needs to be fortified more, then I can play f6. That option is at my disposal. Okay, so they're starting some kingside play. Now, I could also play knight g7. That would be interesting. I wonder about knight g7. Previously, I would have taken without much hesitation, but Knight g7, and then if knight f5, I can make them take. Or I can take and make them recapture with a pawn, thereby blocking this bishop's diagonal further. I kind of like that. Knight f4 allows knight f5, so I'm not as thrilled about that. And taking, they can take with the h-pawn, and then f4 is strengthened. So let's do this. It appears solid to me. And I still want to continue with knight a5. I haven't given up on that plan. Whenever I see this flag, I think of Roger Federer, the tennis great. Probably the most prominent Swiss person of all time, perhaps. Maybe not of all time, at least in modern history. I'm trying to think who the top Swiss chess player is. I think Vadim Milov lives in Switzerland. Yannick Pelletier. Yeah, for a small country, they have some notable sporting achievements. Okay, rook e1. So that just, I don't know, frees up the f1 square. But it doesn't interfere with my plan of knight a5 at all. Yeah, let's go knight a5. If c5 again, I can take on d3 and then take on c5. I may play pawn c5 now. I predict they'll play queen e2. After, let's say, queen e2 and I go c5, let's say they were to close up the center with pawn d5. One plan I might have is queen d7 to a4 to add another attacker to the c4 pawn. I think that would be a nice square for my queen. And that does happen in these structures. I'm feeling great about my position right now. I feel like this is a type of setup that I have a decent understanding of, and I would prefer to play for black most of the time. It's always tougher to be white in these structures, I feel, because the onus is on you to prove that you have compensation for the double pawns. And if the game ever slows down, that bodes well for black's position. They can just pump pieces at your double pawns, and their game plan is pretty simple. Okay, now, do I play like rook e8 first, or do I just go c5 straight away? Or do I play queen d7? All these moves come to mind. Maybe queen d7 is the most flexible. Huh. Maybe, just maybe. Yeah, let's go queen d7 first. They still can't play c5, because if they do, I take on d3, and then I take that pawn. And they're pinned all the same. I'm seeing if I can like drag one of their rooks to d1. They might want to do that to further defend d3. But once one of those rooks gets drugged to d1, I can play c5 and just block everything up. And I still have my sights set on a4. The seed of queen d7 to a4 has now been planted, and white will have to be thinking about that every move. I also like the fact that if they play knight f5, I can take and my rooks are coordinated, so I can choose which one to assign to e8, which is probably where I'll be going in order to defend e5. I suspect I'd play rook fe8, but I'm not entirely sure about that. Rook fe8, in the event of a knight trade on f5, would threaten e takes d4. I have nice pressure. If he goes rook b4 trying to prevent queen a4, that doesn't help in view of c5. I'm going to kick the rook off that square. But I don't want to play queen a4 without c5, most likely, as long as this rook is on b1, since then they could play rook b4. Maybe I could just play, queen a3 then. It's probably not the end of the world, actually. Okay, so they're bringing the knight back. This seems to be like a way to just further support the c4 pawn. So bringing the knight to e3, where it will still be within striking distance of squares that white wants it to be. Yeah, that's not a bad move. It's a pretty good move, actually. I could play knight e6 now that my knight isn't required to stand guard here. But they'll just play g3, I'm thinking. This is a nice plan. Because if I go c5 now, they might play knight e3, and even if they were to lose a pawn in the center, they don't mind at all because they get their knight up to c5, or to d5 rather. Okay. Well, maybe I can go knight e6 with the idea being that it does frustrate the knight e3 attempt. Like, let's say knight e6, g3, and then c5. Then if knight e3, I can take on d4. It's true that they can jump their knight into one of these squares, but as long as I cover like the f6 square that they might fork me from, or if the knight goes to f5, the h6 square, I should be all right there. Let's do that. So I think they are going to take a timeout and play pawn up to g3. They don't want to play bishop g3 because I can take on d4 then. So pawn g3, and then pawn c5. Could also just play a move like king h7 or g7, but somehow c5 seems more accurate. It's more forcing. It almost obliges them to sacrifice a pawn, to be honest, because anything less is probably pretty difficult for them. I don't know, that might be a decent pawn sack, though. So let me look at that again. c5, knight e3, let's say c takes d4. Knight f5 is troubling, because then they attack h6 and they're hitting d4 3 times then. What about queen a4? Back to looking at this move again. So queen a4, knight e3, take d4, still knight f5. Seems like there's a lot of cases where I might just want to pitch this h6 pawn. I'm now second guessing the wisdom of knight e6. But we don't have time to psychoanalyze that move too deeply. What about just f6? Doesn't f6 like take care of a lot of problems for us? f6, knight e3. Yeah, let's do f6. Don't know why it took me so long to even look at that move. So now if knight e3, I take. Knight d5 has lost its sting because there's no knight takes f6 threat. So knight e3, take knight f5 would be probably the way to go. Then I can take c3, they can take h6. It's messy. I've won a pawn there, but the position is opening up. I'm going to have to be careful. I could also play it safe, like knight e3, I could play the knight back to g7. But somehow that doesn't seem right. I think I'd rather take that pawn. Take, knight f5, take c3, knight takes h6, king h8 is probably the best move. My king is very open, though, in that case. Hmm. I don't know. Maybe I have to admit my mistake and just go back to g7. Let's do that. Is f4 going to hurt us? Hopefully not. Don't know if I want to sharpen the position when they have a little bit more time than me. E takes d4, knight f5, take on c3, take h6. King h8, I'm kind of wondering if they can get their queen over to the h file quickly. That's why I'm hesitating to do that. Okay, let's go here. We're just going back. Yeah, not happy with the knight e6 operation. That turned out to be kind of a waste of time. Okay, so what to do if they play f4? Maybe just rook a e8. Defend the center. Looks solid enough. And it can always drop back to this plan of just turtling up and barricading the position. I do have a good pawn chain still. They haven't disrupted my pawn integrity at all. Sometimes you just have to admit that your idea wasn't good and just go back. It's a hard thing to do in chess, but if you decide that going backwards is your best move, you just got to play it. It doesn't matter if your piece was on that square 2 moves prior. Let's bring this rook over. Is he going to go c5? He might play c5. I think that's the plan. I could play c5 myself, that idea from earlier. I just gift them that square, but might be okay. I could also play rook a d8 if I want to be extra crafty. Let's do that. I think we've got time to do this, so. Time as in time in the position, not on the clock. So the idea is if c5, I take on d3, and regardless of which piece they take, I can play d takes c5, and they're still pinned along the file. I wanted to put that rook on e8, but it might just be better on d8. The only piece that gives me problems here is white's knight. It can jump into these weakened squares like that. And that's the only piece that was halfway decent for them. Okay, so f6 is guarded. We don't have to worry about that for the moment. Maybe just go c5 now. No, let's not rush that. But if I don't play that, they might play c5 themselves again. Maybe c6 first? I don't like that so much. Maybe, though. It's a really tough call. Okay. I'm going to do this. We got to make a decision. They're going to go back to e3. And then I think I'll play c5. If they go knight d5, I'll play knight e6. And attack d4 a couple times. b4. Makes sense, actually. They're going to go c5 next move. Okay, we got to play this. Yeah, c5 makes a good deal of sense now. So the position is going to open up. So if c5, I take here, might they take on e5? I get the impression that that's what they're going to do. What if c5 I just play my queen away somewhere? Maybe to c7? To support the b pawn? Not sure. Let's go here, though. I feel like the b6 pawn might need to be defended. Wonder if they can take on b6, a takes, they take here. Wonder if I have trouble with this pawn. They need to move their knight away so their rook and bishop can coordinate on that pawn. Not positive. It's complicated. At least they're using time. They have a pretty nice time edge though if they keep up the play. I'm gonna pre-move this one. But I think it's actually more likely they take on d6. Oh, they took that way. Okay. What now? d5? Nope, this way. Okay, let's take here. Now f3 at least will be attacked. Go knight a6. They didn't do it. b5, a4. Okay, let's go c5. I know I'm weakening squares by doing that. They can bring the knight to e3 again. Okay, let's just do this. Maybe I can play rook b8. f3 is weak. I want to go queen f7 at some point, but I can't leave the defense of the b pawn. King up. Okay, let's just go here. I want to defend this pawn much better than I currently am. They're offering to trade. Okay.
Check.
Let's go king h7. So f3 is still weak. Like maybe now I can shift the focus of my attack. I can put a rook on f6 if I need to defend d6 now. Let's do that. So now I think the focus will be on whether they can play for f4 or not. G4 might have been good on the last move. Yeah, that might have been strong. Then I could have taken on e4 and this rook would fall. Can still do it. Let's do this first though. I don't know about my rook being loose on f6. If they play h4, that would help because then I can go g4. Oh, he saw it. Yeah. Got to do something. Don't know why I played that move. I'm thinking like maybe a8 eventually. I could have just gone to a7 right away if I wanted. It's actually kind of hard for both of us to move. I'm surprised he did that though. Okay, let's jump this in. Eyeing the bishop. b6 remains weak, but for the moment it's fine. Let's go here. Now I'm eyeing this pawn. Does have
time
that,
warning.
doesn't he? Okay, I can take here though. I'm attacking the bishop. So hopefully no g4. Well, now we got to move away. They can take on g5 though. Eeh. Gross. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take now. And hope that nothing bad befalls me. I'm way down on time at this point though. Huh.
Check. Check.
Let's do this. Uh-oh. Mated.
Checkmate.
All right, good game by Fido. Yeah, he got me at the end there. He did find a nice plan, though, in the middle game of knight g3 to f1 to e3. That gave me trouble. I lost the thread right around there. I had a nice position, but lost the thread. Yeah, like knight e6, g3, f6, knight e3. This is where my position started getting away from me a little bit. Let's take a look at it, though. We'll go back and see. So, yeah, f3 is a pretty aggressive way of playing. d5 and c5, I think, are the most common moves here. But I just wanted to play something that gave the position a flavor
Check.
that I'm more familiar with. c5 probably does make sense here, too. If I'm going to take on c3, now is a logical time to do it. Like I said, before they can go knight ge2.
Check.
So I did that, put the knight on c6. The computer likes white with the space advantage and the bishop pair. Not surprising. This plan appeared to work out fine, though. Playing g5, forcing the bishop back. Yeah, knight h5. There was some debate about whether I should push g5 or not, but I think I made the right call there. Bishop a6, knight g3. And here I went knight g7. I was pretty satisfied with that move, but the computer thinks knight f4 is better, just allowing knight f5. Then play knight a5, give the h6 pawn. I don't know. I guess if they
Check.
take it, then king h7, and if the knight retreats, I'm taking d3, queen takes, and then bishop takes c4 is the point. Suppose that's the idea. Somehow looks counterintuitive to allow the knight into f5. Rook e1, knight a5, queen e2. Queen d7 might be inaccurate. I could have played this c5 move a lot earlier than I did. If I would know that they would respond to c5 with d5, then I probably would go for it. But I thought they might maintain the tension here. Just leave the pawn on d4, because I don't really ever want to take twice and open the position up. Unless it was for a very specific reason, and I thought their dark square bishop couldn't do any damage. But maybe I should play c5 sooner. I see the engine is liking that now. In these semi-closed positions, the engine isn't very reliable, though. So knight f1, it says knight e6 is okay. I just didn't feel like I found a good plan after this, though. I did play f6. Knight e3. Okay, so I should take on d4 and follow through. I thought knight f5. And then if I take here, they take h6.
Check.
I have to be careful where I put my king. Like, h7 isn't good because it runs into e5 stuff. Maybe not right away, but... king h8, I thought there was a chance they might do something like this and quickly try to get the queen over to the same file as my king. I guess they could even play it positionally, like the computer just wants to recover the c3 pawn. I would probably take white here, to be honest. So that's what I didn't like about the capture on d4. I was trying to time it so that it was unpleasant for them when I did play that move, but it didn't really work out. I mean, knight g7 felt like a defeat, but I really wanted to keep that knight out of f5. Maybe I should take, though. Maybe I should speculate on this. Roll the dice, see what happens. Because after knight g7, rook ed1, rook ad8, yeah, they started getting the better of me right here. Knight b4, bishop b7, and then c5, like thematic opening of the position. Yeah. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that.
Check.
So maybe the real culprit was that rook ad8 move. Even that the engine says is fine. Or c6. c6 could have been bad. I didn't really consider knight b4 too closely. I was only thinking the knight would come back here, but I should have saw knight b4. So if knight e6, how does this differ? They can still play c5. I take d3, queen takes, d takes, d takes, queen f7. Okay, well, at least the position remains more closed than it was in the game by doing this. Yeah, c5. This is a nice move. He played a very good game. He timed his pawn breaks right. He found the knight f1 to e3 repositioning in the middle game. He definitely deserved to win this game. I missed that g4 move in the time scramble.
Check.
I actually felt like these trades weren't so beneficial for him. But yeah, right here probably. Maybe it wouldn't be as good as I thought, but this move looks to be my best bet. Just trying to pry open that diagonal with my bishop on there. So the point is, if he takes, I take
Check.
here. So I doubled the rooks, but then I couldn't figure out what to do here. Queen b8 was just kind of a nonsense move, but I had 37 seconds left. He did the right thing when your opponent's like has this amount of time left. He didn't pause for too long on any one decision. Like, he didn't play the best moves. Like bishop d5 isn't so good because I get to take, and I don't think he's gained much by that bishop trade, but it wasn't a terrible move, and he, most importantly, played it quickly. Queen e4 I took here. Yeah, this rook f2 move was annoying because now I didn't see a good way to counter both rook takes b6 and g4. And bishop takes g5. I guess rook g6 is my best bet. That deals with the g4 threat at least. If he takes here, what am I doing? Queen a3. Somehow black's better. Okay. Yeah. It just cost me too much time to figure it out. I had 9 seconds after this, and I'm losing anyways. I had to sack my queen. Yeah, and the rest was history.
Check. Check.
Yeah, around here I might have had something,
Check.
but it hardly matters. So, no, it's pre-moving, trying
Check.
not to lose on time.
Checkmate.
So, very good game by Fido. I don't know. I think I'll still play this
Check.
opening from time to time because I want to get better at these structures. And I had a pretty reasonable position in the middle game. I feel like this type of middle game is very rich. And if you start to assimilate the main ideas for both sides, it can be pretty fun and rewarding to play. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow with another standard game. Talk to you guys later. Bye.